I want you to imagine yourself in the 16th century for a moment. Close your eyes and picture this. You are standing at the port of Seville. Massive wooden ships, their sails billowing in the wind, are slowly pulling up to the shore. Crates gleaming under the sun are being lowered from their decks. What is inside them? Pure gold. Solid silver. So much of it that the dock workers are not even surprised anymore. Because these ships come every month. Every month, the same sight. Every month, more treasure. Now take a step back and look at the bigger picture. This empire has the most powerful navy in the world. They are the ones drawing the maps. They are the ones conquering undiscovered continents, from the Americas to Africa, from the Philippines to the Mediterranean, an empire where the sun never sets. And every day, every week, every month, tons of gold and silver are being unloaded at this empire's ports. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to keep it in the back of your mind. If you had gone up to someone living in that era and said, Spain is going to go bankrupt, how would they have reacted? They probably would have burst out laughing. Maybe they would have called you insane. Maybe they would have walked away from you. Because this was the most absurd sentence anyone could utter in that era. How could a country that possesses all the gold in the world possibly go bankrupt? But this is precisely what makes history so fascinating. Because history has shown us time and again that things that seem impossible are sometimes inevitable. And Spain's story is the greatest financial paradox in history. The story of how a nation with unlimited money in its hands collapsed precisely because of that money. Today at Financial Historian Academy, we're going to explore this story in all its depth. And let me tell you this is not just a history lesson. Every sentence I speak has a counterpart in today's world. In every detail, you will see the traces of the modern economy. If you are ready, let us begin. Because Spain's golden curse is far darker and far more relevant than you think. It all actually began with a discovery. The year is 1492. A Genoese sailor financed by Spain, Christopher Columbus, sets out across the ocean with 3 small ships. His goal is to reach India. But what awaits him on the other side of the ocean is neither spices nor silk roads. Before him lies an entirely new continent, and beneath this continent lies an unprecedented amount of gold and silver. But the true meaning of this discovery was not understood the day Columbus's ships returned to Spain. The real story began 30 years later. When the Spanish conquerors, the conquistadors, set foot on the American continent, they found an incredible sight before them. When Hernán Cortés and his soldiers entered the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in 1519, what they saw practically enchanted them. Temples made of gold, gold-plated walls, gold jewelry, gold statues. The Aztec Emperor Montezuma, believing the Spaniards to be emissaries of the gods, presented them with gifts. Golden discs, silver plates, jewels adorned with precious stones. In his letters to the King of Spain, Cortés wrote, "This city is the most beautiful city in the world, and the wealth here surpasses all imagination." But what Cortés did was only the beginning. The real fortune came 13 years later. When Francisco Pizarro attacked the Inca Empire in 1532, he carried out the largest ransom event in history. He took the Inca Emperor Atahualpa prisoner and demanded a ransom so extraordinary that even historians could scarcely believe it. The room where he was held was to be filled with gold all the way to the ceiling. And the Incas actually did it. 6 tons of gold and 12 tons of silver were collected, a treasure worth hundreds of millions of dollars in today's value. Pizarro took the money, but had Atahualpa executed anyway. The empire collapsed. Its treasures were loaded onto ships. I need to stop here and say something. Behind this gold and silver lies an immense human tragedy. Millions of indigenous people were slaughtered, enslaved, and wiped out by disease. The Aztec and Inca civilizations were 2 of the most brilliant civilizations in human history, and they were destroyed one by one. Tragically, every gram of this wealth was stained with human blood. When telling history, we must never forget this. But returning to our economic story, the real turning point was neither the Aztec gold nor the Inca ransom. The real turning point came in 1545. In what is now Bolivian territory, at 4,000 meters above sea level, the Potosi silver mines were discovered. And this discovery would change the world forever. It is impossible to understand this story without talking about Potosi. Because Potosi was not just a mine. Potosi was the largest city of the 16th century. Yes, you heard that right. By the early 1600s, Potosi's population had exceeded 160,000. In the same period, London's population was around 120,000, and Paris's was around 200,000. In the most remote corner of the world, at 4,000 meters altitude, where even breathing was difficult, an enormous metropolis had risen. Why? Because Cerro Rico, the mountain known as Rich Hill, was composed almost entirely of silver. When historians calculated the amount of silver extracted from the Potosi mines, the figures reached staggering proportions. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the amount of silver flowing into Europe increased by a full 300%. In other words, Europe's total silver stock quadrupled. Never before, in any era or any geography, had there been a flow of precious metals on this scale. But this wealth came at a price, and those who paid it were not the Spanish nobles. The indigenous people who worked in Potosi were forced into the mines under inhuman conditions. The Spaniards took over the mita system of forced labor from the Inca era and turned it into a death machine. Indigenous men were forced to work underground for 4 months straight, 12 hours a day. The silver refining process, which used mercury, poisoned the workers. Historians estimate that approximately 8 million people lost their lives in the Potosi mines. 8 million. Every piece of silver from that mountain carried suffering within it. The Spaniards called it Rich Hill, but the indigenous people knew it as the mountain that devours men. The King of Spain did not want to know any of this. All he saw were the ships pulling into the port of Seville, and those ships kept getting bigger. Their cargo kept getting heavier. King Philip II regarded this resource as a gift from God to Spain. Spain was the protector of the Catholic world, God's sword on earth, and this gold and silver would finance their sacred mission. At least that is what the king believed. But there was something that had been forgotten. The laws of economics are more powerful than the decrees of kings. And one of the most fundamental laws of economics is this. When the quantity of something increases, its value decreases. When everyone has gold in their hands, does that gold still hold its value? This was the question that would determine Spain's fate, and the answer began to reveal itself slowly on the streets. I am now going to tell you about one of the most important and least understood phenomena in economic history. Listen carefully. As gold and silver began flooding into Spain, something very strange happened. At first, nobody noticed. Maybe a baker noticed. Maybe a tailor. Prices began to rise slowly. The price of a loaf of bread went up a little. A piece of cloth became slightly more expensive. People did not care. A temporary situation, they thought. For them, it was nothing more than a seasonal fluctuation. But prices did not come back down. On the contrary, they kept rising. Year after year, decade after decade, without stopping. People thought they were getting richer. They had more gold and silver in their hands. But when they went to buy something, they could afford less than the year before. It was an illusion, a wealth mirage. And this mirage prepared Spain for the next stage that would drag it into true catastrophe. Because inflation alone cannot destroy a country. Inflation causes pain. It makes life harder. But societies can cope with inflation. What truly destroyed Spain was something far deeper and far more dangerous: abandoning production. Now put yourself in the shoes of a Spanish farmer, the mid-16th century. You are growing wheat on the hot plains of Castile. The work is hard. You spend hours under the sun. You plow the soil, sow seeds, water, and tend your crops. Months later, harvest time arrives. But when you go to sell your wheat, you notice something. Wheat coming from Holland and France is cheaper than yours. How is that possible? Because prices in Spain have risen so much that production costs have multiplied. You have to pay workers more. Tools are more expensive. Land rent has increased. But in England, in Holland, in France, inflation is not yet this severe. Their production costs are lower. The result? Spanish goods can no longer compete. And then comes the devil's whisper. Why are you working in the fields? You have silver in your hands. Go buy wheat from Holland. Buy cloth from England. Buy wine from France. Why break a sweat? Spain did exactly this. And it was one of the greatest economic mistakes in history. Spain's industrial and agricultural sectors collapsed virtually overnight. Cloth production stopped. Ironworking workshops closed. Fields were abandoned. Craftsmen shut their shops. Importing was easier, cheaper, and they had silver. Why would they bother? Economists today call this condition Dutch disease. And here lies a strange irony of history. The term carries the name of the very Netherlands that grew rich on Spain's gold. Dutch disease describes the following: an abundance of natural resources in a country kills that country's productive sector. Resource income is so easy that nobody wants to bother with the hard work of production. In the short term, everyone is happy, but in the long term, the country loses its capacity to produce. When the resource runs out or loses its value, nothing remains. We have seen this pattern repeated throughout history. Look at oil-rich countries today. They earn enormous revenues, but many have been unable to develop industry, strengthen agriculture, or invest in technology. When oil prices drop, they face severe crises. Spain was the first and most dramatic example of this scenario. But the impact of Dutch disease in Spain went beyond the economy. The social structure was also transformed. Spanish nobles, the Hidalgo class, began to view work as something beneath them. Making a living through manual labor, engaging in trade, practicing a craft was not considered noble. A true Spanish gentleman either fought in wars or lived off his rents. This cultural attitude accelerated the collapse of productivity even further. It is no coincidence that Cervantes wrote Don Quixote during this period. Don Quixote is a character who has lost touch with reality by clinging to the chivalric ideals of a bygone age. A man who attacks windmills and fights imaginary enemies. Spain was turning into exactly such a country, an empire that had lost touch with reality by clinging to the dreams of its golden age, that had abandoned production, that was trying to survive on imports. Cervantes saw this and told the world about it through one of the greatest works of literature ever written, an empire disconnected from production but possessing unlimited silver. This formula alone was dangerous enough. But King Philip II made a move that would make things far worse. Trusting in his limitless gold, he launched simultaneous wars across all of Europe. Philip II was, in the words of historians, a paper king. His desk was piled with documents, letters, reports. He personally attended to every detail. But no matter how hardworking he was, he could not escape the merciless reality of mathematics. Expenditures exceeded revenues, and the gap was growing every year. The list of wars is breathtaking. The Dutch Revolt, also known as the 80 Years' War. This conflict lasted from 1568 to 1648. Protestant Dutch subjects had risen against Catholic Spain's sovereignty. Spain was feeding tens of thousands of soldiers in the Netherlands. Their salaries, weapons, food, everything was financed from Spain. The Netherlands was far away. It was a logistical nightmare. While the Spanish army under the Duke of Alba spilled blood in Holland, Spain's treasury was hemorrhaging. The struggle with England. In 1588, Philip II sent the massive fleet known in history as the Invincible Armada to England. More than 130 ships, nearly 30,000 soldiers. The goal was to invade England and dethrone the Protestant Queen Elizabeth. The result was an utter disaster. The English Navy's tactical superiority and horrific storms scattered the Armada. Spain lost the greater part of its fleet overnight. Thousands of sailors perished. The fortune spent building that fleet sank to the bottom of the ocean. It was not just a military blow, but a psychological one. Spain's myth of invincibility was shattered. The rivalry with the Ottoman Empire in the Mediterranean. Spain was locked in constant struggle against the Ottoman navy. The Battle of Lepanto in 1571 was a victory, but it did not last. The Ottomans rebuilt their fleet within a year. The rivalry continued, and money continued to pour out. Clashes with France over Italy. The enormous cost of colonial administration in the Americas, controlling vast territories, building garrisons, suppressing local revolts, protecting sea routes. Each one a separate black hole, and the cost of these wars was astronomical. The annual cost of a single Spanish infantryman exceeded the 10-year income of an ordinary Spanish family. The Spanish forces in Flanders alone spent 3.5 million ducats per year, which was nearly half of Spain's total annual revenue. And here, the most tragic paradox of the story emerges. The silver coming from the Americas had been spent before it even reached Spain's ports. Spain was constantly borrowing from Genoese and German bankers to finance its wars. The Fugger family, the Welser family, Genoese banking dynasties. These bankers extended credit to Spain and in return placed liens on the silver that would arrive the following year. The silver had debt written against it, before it even left the Americas. When ships docked at Seville, the silver chests were handed directly to the bankers' representatives. It was a debt spiral in every sense. In today's terms, Spain had mortgaged its future. Think of someone living on credit cards and making only the minimum payment each month. The principal never decreases. Interest accumulates. The debt grows. And finally, the inevitable happened. 557. Spain's first official bankruptcy. The king declared he could not pay his debts. The bankers were shocked. But silver was still flowing, so the debts were restructured. 1575. Second bankruptcy. 1596. Third bankruptcy. Creditors no longer trusted Spain the way they once had. Borrowing costs soared. But the story did not end there. In the 17th century, 3 more bankruptcies came in 1607, 1627, and 1647. 6 in total. The richest country in the world went bankrupt 6 times. Think about that sentence. Because this is not just a piece of historical trivia, it is a universal lesson about what money and production truly mean. So where did all that silver go? Spain was going bankrupt, but someone was getting rich. The question is, who? The answer forms the most ironic chapter of Spain's story. Money was flowing into Spain, but it was not staying there, because Spain was now buying everything from abroad. Silver landed at Spain's ports, and from there, it was transformed into English cloth, Dutch wheat, French luxury goods, Italian weapons. Spain had ceased to be a country and had become a massive transfer hub. The wealth coming from the Americas passed through Spain and poured into the coffers of its rivals. And those rivals used the money they received very differently. Let us start with Holland. At the beginning of the 16th century, it was a small, swampy part of the Spanish Empire. But the Dutch were geniuses when it came to trade. Instead of consuming the silver Spain spent, they converted it into investment. They built ships. They founded trading companies. They opened the world's first modern stock exchange in Amsterdam. The Dutch East India Company, established in 1602, became history's first multinational corporation. Financed by Spain's silver, this company transformed the Netherlands into a trading empire. England used the silver Spain paid to grow its manufactories. English merchants accumulated capital. That capital would eventually lay the foundation for the Industrial Revolution. In a sense, Spain's silver indirectly financed the English Industrial Revolution. Think about it. At the roots of history's greatest economic transformation lies the fact that the production ethos Spain abandoned was embraced by England. Genoese bankers extended credit to Spain at staggering interest rates. As Spain borrowed, Genoa grew rich. France, meanwhile, strengthened its craftsmanship and industry by supplying the Spanish court's insatiable demand for luxury goods. But there is also a Mediterranean dimension to the story, and this dimension is often overlooked. Spain's cheap silver reached not only northern Europe, but also the Ottoman Empire through Mediterranean trade. And here, something unexpected happened. The Ottoman Empire was one of Spain's greatest enemies in the 16th century. The two navies clashed constantly in the Mediterranean, but Spain inflicted damage on the Ottomans through economic channels that it could never have achieved through arms, without even realizing it. The cheap Spanish silver that flowed into Ottoman lands through Mediterranean trade drove down the value of the akçe, the Ottoman currency. Prices began to rise in the Ottoman Empire as well. Soldiers' wages eroded. The Tumar cavalry system collapsed. This economic deterioration formed one of the economic foundations of the Salauli rebellions that erupted at the end of the 16th century and ravaged Anatolia. Behind these revolts, which caused the death or displacement of hundreds of thousands of people, lay, indirectly, the silver of Potosi. Spain's silver shook not just Europe, but the entire Mediterranean basin. This shows how ancient a phenomenon globalization truly is. Even in the 16th century, a change in one geography could affect societies thousands of miles away through a domino effect, just as an interest rate decision made in the United States today can rattle the currencies of developing nations. And all this economic collapse rotted Spain's social fabric as well. By the end of the 16th century, the number of beggars in the cities was multiplying. Rural areas were emptying. The population was declining. Yes, Spain's population actually shrank in the 17th century. Wars, epidemics, hunger, and poverty. In 1609, the expulsion of the Moriscos, the forcibly Christianized Muslim population, dealt Spain a massive loss of labor. The Moriscos were among the country's most productive farmers and most skilled craftsmen. With their departure, agriculture and craftsmanship deteriorated even further. Inequality had reached horrifying proportions. On one side, nobles eating from golden plates in the palace. On the other, common people searching for breadcrumbs in the streets. The clergy and aristocracy were exempt from taxes. The entire burden fell on ordinary people. Spanish literature described this period through the concept of desengaño, disillusionment, disenchantment, the dawning realization that the Golden Age's bright promises had come to nothing. When Quevedo mockingly wrote, "Don Money is a powerful knight," he was in fact diagnosing the soul of his society. The Picaro literature that was born in this period, novels in which roguish heroes resorted to trickery and fraud to survive, reflected the reality of society. Making an honest living had become impossible. And perhaps the most telling indicator was this. While the number of students studying law and theology at Spanish universities was rising, the number interested in natural sciences and engineering was falling. Society preferred jockeying for positions in the bureaucracy and pursuing religious careers over producing and inventing. Can there be a clearer sign that a society has lost hope in its future? Spain's collapse fundamentally altered the international balance of power. Holland won its independence and became the superpower of the 17th century. But interestingly, they too fell victim to their own excesses. The tulip mania of 1637, history's first great speculative bubble, occurred in the very Netherlands that had grown wealthy on Spain's money. England rose in the areas where Spain had retreated and would become the new global superpower by the 18th century. France leveraged Spain's weakening to become Europe's dominant land power. And the Ottoman Empire, as we discussed, was drawn into its own era of stagnation through the indirect effects of Spanish silver. From a broader perspective, Spain's story is the story of how the center of the global economy shifted from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and Northern Europe. This shift was decisive in shaping the modern world. Today's balance of power is the result of this economic transformation that has been unfolding for centuries. Now let us bring this historical lesson into today's world. Because Spain's story is not just an event confined to the past, it is being repeated today. And perhaps the most frightening thing is that nobody seems to notice, just as nobody saw the catastrophe coming during Spain's golden age. First parallel, monetary policy. Since 2020, the amount of dollars put into circulation in the United States has increased by 40%. The European Central Bank has created trillions of euros. The Bank of Japan has been printing money for years. The greater part of this money was used not to finance real production, but to prop up financial markets and roll over government debt. What is the modern version of Spain's silver galleons, if not the Fed's balance sheet? Instead of the Potosi mines, we have central banks' capacity to create digital money. But the result is the same. When you increase the money supply independently of production, the value of money falls. How much can you buy today for $1 compared to what you could buy before 2020? Look at housing prices. Look at food prices. Look at education and healthcare costs. Though hidden behind official inflation figures, people can feel their purchasing power declining, just as the Spanish people felt it in the 16th century. Second parallel, disconnection from production. The United States and Britain have largely abandoned their manufacturing sectors over the past 40 years. Factories moved to China, Vietnam, Bangladesh. In the short term, it seemed logical. But what is the difference between Spain saying, "Why should we grow wheat when we can buy it from Holland with silver?" and the modern West saying, "Why should we build factories when we can import from China?" The COVID-19 pandemic laid bare just how dangerous this dependency was. When supply chains broke down, even a simple mask became impossible to find. Third parallel, the debt spiral. The total federal debt of the United States has surpassed $34 trillion, more than its annual gross domestic product. Interest payments alone exceed $1 trillion per year. Just as Spain's silver went to bankers before it even reached port, a growing share of America's tax revenues goes solely to interest payments. Fourth parallel, social inequality. The money created by central banks inflated asset prices. Stocks, real estate, cryptocurrencies hit record highs. Those who owned assets grew richer while wage earners grew poorer. The dynamic of gold accumulating in the palace while the people grew impoverished in Spain is repeating itself today in a different form, but through the same mechanism. Fifth parallel, cultural transformation. In Spain, work had begun to be looked down upon. What do we see on social media today? Promises of easy money, the cult of passive income, the dream of getting rich without working. The modern version of Spain's Hidalgo class. When societies stop respecting productivity, the seeds of collapse have been sown. The lessons to be drawn from Spain's story apply to individuals just as much as to nations. First lesson. What makes a country or a person wealthy is not the amount of money they hold, but their capacity to produce. Money is a tool, not an end. True wealth is the ability to create value. Second lesson. Easy money brings hard lessons. The fact that the vast majority of lottery winners go bankrupt within a few years is proof of this on an individual scale. Third lesson. Debt brings your future into the present, but steals from the future. Spain entered a debt spiral by spending future years' income today. Many countries and individuals are falling into the same trap. Fourth lesson. Diversification saves lives. Spain became dependent on a single source of income. When that source proved insufficient, it had nothing left to fall back on. Fifth and most important lesson. History repeats itself for those who do not learn its lessons. And now we come to the final question. I'm going to leave this question unanswered because I want to think about the answer together with you. Spain's collapse is one of the best documented economic disasters in human history. It has entered the textbooks. Everyone knows it. So why are we repeating the same mistakes? Perhaps the answer is this. Every generation thinks this time will be different. The Spaniards thought so too. We have gold. We have power. Nothing can happen to us, but it did. 6 bankruptcies worth. Can the modern economy find a way out of the trap Spain fell into? Or are we too on the brink of a great bankruptcy? I believe in one thing. To understand the past is to see the future. A society that does not produce will collapse. A society that drowns in debt will collapse. A society that worships money will collapse. This was true 500 years ago. It is true today. And if we do not change something, it will be true tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Understanding the history of finance is seeing the future. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with the people around you. Because the more people learn these lessons, the less likely we are to repeat the same mistakes. See you in the next video. Our journey into the depths of history continues at Financial Historian Academy.